You're in control. We're back to, okay. Okay, guys, let's get started here and continue where we left off yesterday. And the technical problems have been solved, so you can, Lamoria will control the mics. You don't have to do what we did yesterday, and she's got all the power. Okay, so we're going to go through some more amendments and see what we can do for the next hour. We do have some bill hearings, et cetera. Okay, we're going to start with Senator Hester's. Is that okay? Yep. Okay. We're going to start with the data center amendment because I understand we're going to have to do a little substitution over what we adopted yesterday, and I think I don't know who wants to articulate the reasoning.
I'm fine.
Okay, Senator Hester, do you want to just explain? And again, we're on Hester Amendment 843329/1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, what this amendment does, it's the same exact thing that we voted on yesterday with two technical changes. The first thing that it does is it changes the district heat systems to district energy systems, as they do both heating and cooling. And that's the definition in the bill. The second thing it does is it reworks the definition of incremental resources to ensure that battery storage isn't captured in the non-emitting portion of that section. So what I need to do, I think, is to motion to withdraw the amendment that we had yesterday and then put forward this amendment with these two technical changes.
So you're going to withdraw Amendment 753122/1 and replace it with Amendment 843329/1.
Yes.
Okay, does everybody get that? Okay. Okay, let's just take all in favor of doing a motion withdraw / motion to substitute. Raise your hand. Now the substitute amendment. Do you want to move that favorable? Okay, it's been moved by the sponsor, second from Senator Washington. Okay, all in favor of this substitute amendment, raise your hand from Senator Hester. All opposed, that motion carries. Okay, let's go to a second Hester amendment. Devin, which one do you have?
So I have Committee 463021/1, 463021/1.
Okay, let's describe the amendment, and then Senator Hester can weigh in as well.
So the amendment adds uncodified language to require the Public Service Commission to prepare recommendations for changes to the next program cycle for the Empower program. It specifically says to study the goals for the program, including the size and scope of the goals, ways in which the program may be restructured to further avoid electric system reliability risk and wholesale energy costs, and methods for selecting programs for inclusion, including cost effectiveness testing.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Speaking onto the purpose of this bill, I had a crash course in Empower this weekend, and we're doing like a lot of big stuff to it without fully understanding the program. And I spoke to the PSC and I said, like, hey, do you guys ever do kind of reviews of this? And he said, yeah, we did one a few years ago at your request. And I said, well, if we're going to decrease the goals and then increase the goals again, could you come back with some recommendations for us to consider policy-wise so that when we come back here in 2 years and the prices start to go up again, we actually know kind of what we're talking about. And so that is the purpose, it directs the commission to take that broader view to come back with some recommendations in the 2 years.
Okay, any questions for Senator Hester on this amendment? Okay, Senator, would you move it?
I'd move the amendment.
Okay, Senator Hester moves the amendment. Senator Harris seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor of this particular amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Let's next move to Hester Amendment number 3.
So, members, this would be 753927/1, 753927/1. And Senator Hester can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but what I read this amendment to do is it requires a cost-effective test for residential sector subprograms by determining whether the cost effectiveness of a subprogram can be approved through consolidation, a reduction in administrative costs, or streamlining delivery of services.
Okay,
this-
Senator Hester?
This is the consolidated amendment.
Correct.
So it also addresses that drafting issue related to solar that Devin raised yesterday. Once again, thank you, Senator Washington, for catching that. So it removes the reference to solar in 7-223A3 and clarifies that the existing 20% solar carve-out for counting towards empowered goal sunsets after 2029.
Okay. Any additional questions on this amendment? Is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Okay, Senator Hester moves favorable, second from Senator Washington. Okay, all in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Devin, let's go to the next, the fourth Hester amendment.
This is 993-221/1, 993-221/1. It adds, again, uncodified language, changing the reporting requirement, or the Strategic Energy Planning Office requirement to assess certain policy scenarios from the Economic Matters Committee to the Environment and Transportation Committee, and adds, clarifies that the two committees may offer that office up to 5 policy scenarios to study by December 31, 2026. The policy scenarios would be added by December 31, 2026.
This is just ensuring that since, we had the override of the veto, we still get a chance this year to have studies done this year, which was part of our discussion yesterday. So it effectively lets us do it this year instead of waiting till next year.
Okay, questions? Okay.
Move the amendment.
Hester moves the amendment, second from Senator Harris. All in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. And then that brings us to the final Hester amendment. Devin?
This is 383-227/1. 383-227/1. And so this is the amendment that Senator Hester did not offer yesterday. And it clarifies that when the Department of General Services goes through its 50-site study, the department will also be able to issue a request for proposals for long-term leases for new or expanded generating stations or storage devices on any state-owned site, because that's obviously what the General Services Department has authority over.
Okay.
Once again,
Yes.
reflecting back on the House hearing, I'd ask the speaker, if we have these 50 sites that we're looking at, do we have to wait until we reconvene to actually do something with them if they're ready to go? And I talked with her chief of staff over the weekend, and he clarified, he's like, well, we don't know. These are going to be industrial sites, this, that, and the other thing. And so what this says is, if we do have state sites that are suitable with very few barriers, then DGS can move, forward in issuing an RFP for a long-term lease. And even if it's just one site, then we've got one more site with community solar on it or something like that. I don't know. So I'd move the amendment.
Okay, questions for Senator Hester? Okay, we have a motion. Senator Hester, are you moving the amendment?
I move the amendment.
Okay, we have a motion, second from Senator Harris. Discussion, all in favor of this Hester amendment number 5, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, let's move to an amendment from Senator Carrozza. Devin?
So this is Amendment 523721/1. What this amendment does is it adds the study of levelized full system cost electricity to the provisions of the bill. The amendment is slightly changed from the bill that this committee passed earlier this year, and it would allow for the Public Service Commission it requires the Public Service Commission to use the levelized full system cost of electricity model, and allows the Public Service Commission to use other methods that the Public Service Commission considers appropriate to analyze the costs of meeting the state's electricity needs.
Okay, again, this is essentially a bill that we passed, Senate Bill 270, which we passed unanimously in this committee, unanimously on the full Senate with that small tweak. Senator Carrozza, you want to add anything to what Devin said?
No, just move the amendment.
Okay, Senator Carrozza moves this amendment. Is there a second? Okay, second from Senator Brooks. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of the Carrozza amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Let's next take up Senator Gallion amendment.
So this amendment, members, is by Senator Gallion, 563-927/1, 563-927/1. And what this amendment does, it's a bill that was heard in this committee by, that was sponsored by Senator Jennings, and it would require, instead of the Public Service Commission notifying landowners of the potential for a certificate of public convenience and necessity for transmission lines, it would require the entity that is the transmission line owner to notify the residents.
Okay, I'll let Senator Gallion weigh in. Just one of the reasons I think we hadn't moved the Jennings bill was, I guess, twofold. So the PSC has a whole process in place for notification. And in fact, they can require, if they think it's helpful, they can require the transmission owner to do the notification. And so and there's a reason I think the Public Service Commission is probably the better entity, because they're in the process of analyzing everything when the appropriate time to do the notification would be. This is putting the onus on the transmission owner, which, again, I just will throw that into the conversation, the discussion. The PSC seems like the right place for this notification to emanate. They can ask the transmission owner to do the notification, and so putting the onus back again on the it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that said, we're going to sponsor Senator Gallion. You've got the floor, and then we'll go to Senator Washington.
Thank you, and I think I was here for most of that bill hearing, and you know, his constituents, the senator from District 7's constituents, this process did not work for them. So we're looking at tightening that up a little bit, changing a little bit. So what this amendment does, it requires that the direct notice to affected and adjacent landowners include in plain language, which is something we've done here with different things, whether it be ballots or whatever, an explanation of the process, the right to intervene, and the deadline. And from that hearing we had before, it felt like there was a lack of clarity on a lot of that. So it ensures notice is provided at the time of application, informs landowners of their right to participate in those PSC proceedings, and establishes that failure to provide notice can invalidate the approval process. Why does this matter? It's about transparency. It's about public participation. It protects property owners, because as we all know, these transmission lines can impact their property use, their property values, and we want to make sure these landowners are informed early, and I believe that this amendment does that. So I'd like to move the amendment.
Okay. We had let's get Senator Washington into the conversation.
I don't know if there was a second, but I was.
Okay, is there a second from Senator Carrozza? Okay.
So I like this amendment. I have an amendment that sort of does something similar in that typically in the local process, there is any other construction, there's a requirement of a notice, like posting a notice. And if a notice is not posted properly, in fact, dealing with something right now, a stop work permit is issued. So this really isn't outside of what is done with other construction proposals. Doing it at the point of application, I also think is a good thing. I guess my only question is where would the notice go? Would the notice need to be posted on the proposed site? I guess I want to ask, like, what's the form of the notice? I mean, you're doing mail, you're saying mail, a notice of intent. Is that what you're thinking?
Where were you on the?
Oh, sorry, so you're on the bill, page 2?
You know, we have the PSC here.
Oh,
There's some
okay.
questions. I think this would be a good, who do we have here?
Yeah.
It's by certified mail.
Mr. Baker. Why don't you come up here, because
But also-
we want to make sure we understand kind of the current process within the PSC, because I mentioned that. Okay, Senator Washington, just
Yeah.
question, maybe,
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, did
can
you
you
hear
just
the
re-
question?
Yeah, so Ben Baker, Maryland PSC. Can you just please repeat the question for me real quick?
Certainly. So if we were to provide notice, right? So what is currently the process for communities to be notified of a proposal for a transmission line or, yeah, in this case, it's transmission line?
Okay, give me a second. So for, I know generation much better. So give me 1 second. Go ahead, Jim. All right, sorry. Okay.
Should. Do they have a
Okay.
copy of the amendment?
Yeah, okay, so what we do is once it's filed with us, the applicant has an obligation to, well, either us or the applicant, we typically require the applicant, they need to make notice to all applicable adjacent landowners next to where the facility or the line is going. So that's about the time it would come in terms of what we would require in terms of notice. There's also requirements for public meetings as this process continues, but that's further down the line. So in the beginning, up front, the application notice requirement is when they file, and that's when they have to notify all adjacent landowners.
So, and currently, so you currently require them to notify just adjacent. So that would mean right next, it's not the fully impacted area.
Right.
Correct? Okay, so
Yeah.
I think that this expands who would get notified. So you don't typically do this. You already typically require.
We typically obligate the transmission owners to do the work of notifying. That's also what we do with the utilities. We will sometimes, like when there's a public proceeding we are going to have, we'll put notice out on our website. But typically for this kind of a case, we're going to put it on the applicant because they know where they're going to make sure the affected communities are aware of it. There will be requirements for public meetings as well.
And just so that I think this is why we need the bill, do you set any requirements for how the notification needs to occur?
We probably have a couple. I don't know them off the top of my head. Though Nikki, do you just want to sit down and give? This is Nikki Wiggins. She is our legislative director.
Hi, committee, sorry. To your question, Senator, if it is a notice for a hearing, then we have a requirement that it has to be done by certified mail. But the notice requirement that goes out just to tell them that the work is going to be done or that a proceeding is going to take place, there's no requirement in statute. But we do have some regulations about how they have to contact local communities.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, well, let me just, because I'm reading the actual language one more time, and then I'll yield to Senator Gallion. I mean, my issue with this, I'm looking at D1 in particular in the amendment. Failure to provide notice under this section completely invalidates the public hearing. In other words, if one person does not get a notice because maybe they moved or their wrong address, the whole public hearing process is deemed insufficient. And you could read this to mean then you got to start all over. You don't know how long through the process the project is. And a project inevitably could be never built because one or two or three people, this invalidation language is really a blunt instrument that I think is problematic. So with that commentary on subsection D1, I'm going to yield to you, Senator Gallion.
Back to the genesis for this. So I just got informed a little more background on why this was brought forward in the bill from Senator Jennings. It was discovered that the utility building the Maryland Piedmont utility project interpreted Maryland law differently and did notify elected officials and affected landowners about their right to intervene, deadlines, and instructions to do so. Whereas BGE did not and merely interpreted Maryland law to be an advertisement in the Baltimore Sun, placement on their website, and one social media post. Hence, the difference between 116 landowners intervening in the MPRP case, well as Carroll, Baltimore, and Frederick counties, compared to not one landowner or one elected official intervening in the BSRM case. simply because they were never informed that they had the right to do so. So this is, hopefully will remove some ambiguity and provide a clear, fair process for these future transmission projects.
Okay, Senator Washington?
I do think the word invalidate kind of heightens, but it is or should be interpreted that providing notice is a requirement of most permits. And failure to provide notice should have consequences. So whatever, and the consequence can be interpreted that the permit is pulled back and then there's a reassessment of it. So I think that since this is happening at the application period, is that correct? This is happening at the point of application is how I read this amendment. So no construction or anything should have occurred by then. Right, so.
Okay, well, again, I'll reiterate, the invalidation language really can set a project back to a point where it never gets, I mean, I'll say it again, I think that particular verbiage is extremely blunt instrument, and so, but that, we can agree to disagree on that one.
I'd be okay removing the invalidate part.
Well, then I'm not sure what happens. I mean,
Well,
again, we want to
it's-
be careful with this conceptual back and forth here. That's a really significant part of the
Well,
amendment.
Mr. Chair, as we're going through a bill of this magnitude, it affects so many things. We've talked through a lot of different things in this committee, and this is really an important issue. And
I agree, but
to
I'm
have
asking.
all these people notified, by direct mail like that, I think is a very good step.
Okay, but you're proposing to eliminate the word invalidate. I'm not sure what the implication is of that is for the amendment.
Can we get counsel their advice on that? Or if it's a policy thing, I guess he won't be able to.
Can I make a suggestion, trying to figure it out? So we already have there's the language right above your D that says unless the failure is willful, the failure of a public service company to provide notice does not invalidate a public hearing or require that another hearing take place. So you're trying to, address the fact that there's no consequences. So maybe simply saying that failure to provide a notice under this section may allow for a public hearing or another public hearing. Because again, what B is doing is sort of striking any type of potential for public engagement unless it's determined that it's willful. And instead, this is just saying, if you don't post or if you don't send the mail, which is easy to validate, they can show, we issued this mail at this point. So it doesn't matter if I say I never got it, the company can demonstrate that they sent it, particularly if it's being sent by certified mail. And you're not requiring that everyone recognizes or confirms receipt of the mail. So I think that would not allow, or that would make it less plausible that somebody one individual or a couple of households who never check their mail could hold it up.
Could I just yield to counsel, then we'll go to Vice
Yeah.
Chair.
So
Counsel.
in order to cure this provision, you would have, I believe that you would have to strike the entirety of D. And put back in the B that has been stricken out. Because what then you would do is you would require the public notice provisions associated with it without the penalty provision, if that was the committee's wish. But again, I would say that the Public Service Commission already has the authority to do that.
Okay, Senator Gallion, and then we'll go to, Senator Gallion, then I'll go to Vice Chair.
I would like to withdraw the previous motion to accept this and to now say I'd like to move that we accept this amendment with that change where you remove or you add back in the lowercase b and take out the D below it. I need a second on that. Anybody want a second?
Okay, can we get, let's get a little discussion, and if second is there, we'll, okay, so the vice chair, and then we'll go Senator Hester, and then we'll take up the motion on this amendment. And again, without doing what you're doing, it's not clear to me the PSC doesn't already have the authority to do what you just described, but that said, Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to suggest either that we vote the Gallion Amendment, or if he wants to withdraw it and we see whether Devin can draft us something, I would be more comfortable reading it and not just having it described.
Okay, that's it. Senator Hester, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, but I mean, there's a lot to this, but, and I was just curious, I mean, we're trying to increase transparency, but this amendment kind of moves everything from the PSC, you know, to the transmission operator. And I guess I'd be more comfortable leaving it with the PSC, but taking something small maybe, you know, not something so prescriptive, but like, is there one extra piece of like, just requiring them to do a letter that you could like add on the floor or something like that? I mean, maybe PSC, is there any other, what do they do in other states? Like, I assume it's generally the PSC that does this, and then do the transmission owners do anything in other states?
I've never looked into that, so I just don't know, but I will say we do get on top of companies for doing these notices. If for some reason people haven't been appropriately notified, we've had to delay procedural schedules and whatnot to make sure that appropriate notice is provided.
Okay, Senator Washington?
We just heard PSC sort of testify that their general practice is to require the developers to do this. That's already their general practice. And so this would be codifying their general practice, but also very specific, making specific for all utility companies the nature of the communication, and that it has to be certified mail. Yeah, that's the only requirement.
Mr. Baker?
And
just-
so,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, so I think the first part of it does that, and that there is value to that. And I think the value of maintaining the consequences isn't as pertinent right now, and keeping the existing law in place after the requirement in the notice. So what that would mean is, as the amendment sponsor suggests, would be to strike D.
And then I just wanted to clarify, Nikki found our COMAR, which is 2079-0202, which effectively at the time of application, they have to either provide by electronic copy or if by mail, and let us know the number of copies. The governing body of each basically impacted location, the executive of those locations, each member of the General Assembly representing any part of the county in which a project is located, each member of the General Assembly representing each county within 1 mile of the proposed location, the Planning and Zoning Commission of each county and municipal corporation, each landowner that is adjacent on which the line will be located. They only have to provide notice, though. The Department of Environment, and then a bunch of state agencies. So I just want to make clear what we do have these notice requirements today. That it just, yeah.
Codifying it.
Okay, Senator Hester, and then I think we need to make some decisions here. Okay, you had a motion. What I guess to the vice chair's comment, I mean, it would be nice to have an actual revised amendment if you're looking to do it that way. Well, I just want to make sure we really fully understand what we're doing here. Do you want to, okay, you want to press your motion? Okay. Is there a second? Okay, second from Senator Simon. Okay, again, verbalize what you're proposing. Again, the alternative would be is get a bill, an amendment drafted, and potentially a floor amendment, which we're not going to be probably on third reader or second reader till Friday, as opposed to winging it. But that said, you know, we can take a roll call vote on what you're proposing, but why don't you reassert what you're proposing?
Okay, so it's the amendment that everybody has. If you go to page 3 of 4, it's putting where B, about a little over halfway down the page, B is back in, and then D is stricken. Correct, Devin?
Yes, that's correct. We would also have to change, we just would delete the brackets around number 2 above and delete the C as well.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Baker, like, are you following this? I'm trying to still square with what we're doing here, whether it's already what you're doing or can do. I mean, whether the amendment is necessary. Do you have a copy of the amendment?
I have not seen a copy of the amendment, so I
Yeah.
apologize. But I can look at it real quick.
Oh, my God. Debbie, you need your copy, huh? I'll do it.
And that's what got struck. Okay, give me 1 second, Chair, indulge me. Thank you. All right.
Okay, so he's proposing, Senator Gallion's proposing, striking subsection B, part of the amendment.
So this is the 204 requirement, not the 7-207 requirement.
Right, correct.
That's for public hearing. This is for public hearing.
This is only for the public hearing.
Can I help him?
Yeah, while you're looking at that, Mr. Baker, Devin wanted to weigh in one more time.
So what I read as amended by Senator Gallion, what this amendment would do would add a second notice requirement for landowners or for transmission line owners to notify the landowners, the landowner in which the transmission line would run through, and the adjacent landowners to where that transmission line would run through, and would require a notice to come from the transmission line owner by certified mail, and that would supersede the Public Service Commission's notification requirements that are in law and in regulation.
Okay, so it's taking the PSC,
Okay.
maybe to Senator Hester's point, kind of out of the equation and putting the onus on the transmission owners, which I think is problematic. But that said, you did make a motion, and there was a second properly. And so,
And I'm
Yeah.
also reminded by the Department of Legislative Services, we'd have to strike E as well.
Which one else are we striking?
We would have to strike E as well.
E, okay.
okay, well, let's just do a roll call on this, verbal oral representation, amendment from Senator Gallion. And with that, Lemuria, Senator Gallion, we're good?
Senator Kagan?
No.
Senator Kagan, no. Senator Hester?
No, so not upholding the PSCL.
Senator Hester, no. Senator Gallion? Yes. Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson?
No.
Senator Watson, no. Senator Attar? No. Senator Attar, no. Senator Harris?
No.
Senator Harris, no. Senator Brooks?
No.
Senator Brooks, no. Senator Carozza?
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneer? Senator Simoneer, yes. And Senator Feldman?
Okay, no, motion fails. Okay, let's move on to Senator Watson's amendment next. Devin?
Senator Watson's amendment is number 583125, 583125. What this amendment does, on page 8 of 20, it adds a study requirement or an annual reporting requirement from the Maryland Clean Energy Center on the green and renewable, sorry, I'm going to get this wrong, green and renewable energy efficiency for nonprofits loan fund. Then on page 15 of 20, it adds an annual report for the county, each county and municipality for residential solar energy systems permits issued annually, so detailing the total number of permits issued by a county. And then once that report is given to the Maryland Energy Administration, the Maryland Energy Administration, in consultation with each county and municipality that has to submit this report, would then prepare an annual report detailing the total number of permits issued for residential solar energy systems in the state. So first report from the counties and municipalities for each county to MEA, and then MEA would then report annually on the total number of solar permits, residential solar permits that are issued. Finally, on page 17 of 20, the amendment changes the word supervisor to officer as far as it relates to the issue with compensation and bonuses that are in the original bill.
Okay, Senator Watson, so there's a couple of different issues in your amendment. Again, the supervisor officer is the last one, and then the other parts, there's a couple other issues there. So you want to add to what Devin presented to the committee?
Devin, on page 15. The reporting requirement on page 15. The intent was to capture the number of permits, but then determine based on the number of permits the expected energy reduction off the grid, right? And so, you know, we can put up solar panels all day, all night, but the whole purpose of the solar is to reduce the impact to the grid, and I didn't see that baked in that amendment.
No, Senator, I don't see it in the amendment either.
All right, so that's an issue. And then the other amendment that I had that I didn't hear you mention talked about in the bill we struck out electric vehicles. And my amendment put electric vehicles back in for the purpose of determining the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. You recall me emailing you that?
It's not, I'm checking in this amendment, but I do not see that specific language in this amendment.
And so just for colleagues, just for your purpose, you know, we've been on this trek to, you know, push electric vehicles for years now. And the whole purpose of it was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce our carbon footprint. And if the electric vehicles that we currently have are not somehow counted and captured to determine the impact, you know, what are we doing? Just pushing people to buy new cars?
It does actually return it. It's the very last page, the language at the end that strikes and substitutes additional language. It does add electric vehicles.
So that's put back in there. I think this is a great start. You know, and colleagues, my whole purpose was we do a lot of things, you know, in my opinion, I told you a lot of things we heard were very fuzzy. I want to put some metrics so that we can make some fact-based, data-driven, informed decisions and not just, you know, waving hands in the air, hoping that, you know, rates go down. We have to show that we're making progress in our reduction goals. So I'd like to move the amendments if nobody else has a comment on it.
Okay, just, again, I'll yield to the vice chair, but okay, there's three separate issues, right? You've got the Green Renewable Energy Efficiency for Nonprofits Loan Program, which is Vice Chair Kagan's bill. We've got the solar permitting issue with the software, which is kind of a second issue. And then the third issue is supervisor versus officer. And then on the final, actually four issues. And then the fourth is what you just mentioned on the EV issue, right? I mean, am I missing? I just want to make sure because we have it all lumped in one amendment. And if somebody,
That's correct.
okay, so with that, four different topics, the vice chair on just the first section dealing with the bill that you had, do you want to comment on that before we discuss any of the other three topics?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that you made clear that this is a lot mushed together. A lot of our amendments have been a little more focused on one portion. The Green Bill, I thought that Senator Watson's suggestion that there be annual reporting was a good idea. And as agreed, I had an amendment drafted. The one that the amendment office did for me in my name that was going to be considered today is different than the one in this amendment. And I don't love that it's being kind of wedged in here. I would prefer that green be considered and discussed separately. The report, and I am happy to if Senator Watson wanted to figure out some other thing. But for instance, in my amendment, the report comes December 1st of each year to the governor as well. In the Watson version, it comes January 31st, doesn't include the governor, but January 31st seems late for the General Assembly to have the data to consider drafting legislation to address anything that may or may not be working. And it just feels like that's like just starting with that. So I don't love that we're mushing this together.
Okay, Senator Watson, could I just maybe suggest that perhaps, and do you have your amendment yet, or it's still not back?
It's back.
Okay.
We've had it.
Could we maybe just, would you be opposed to taking up the other three parts of your bill, and then let's sort of, and then vote on that, and then maybe see what Senator Kagan has on this first section dealing with her bill and the program that she put? That would be fine. Okay, but when we do anything, let's hear from Senator Hester.
Well, I thought that my colleague down here was a better poker player than I was, but you've rolled in like 5 bills, so there's more for us not to like in it.
Sorry to disappoint.
I know. I mean, I would expect more from somebody as smooth as you usually are. But anyways, I say that in all good fun. Unfortunately, the bit about the officer versus the supervisor kills this amendment for me. So I think we have to do everything possible to make sure the utilities are paying their fair share. I do not want them to pay anybody, excessive bonuses, regardless of, this would bring that more in. So I am a no on this part of this wonderful amendment.
So let's do the amendment item. Chair.
Okay, we can discuss this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think process-wise here.
Okay.
Okay.
Y'all
fair
work that
enough.
out over there.
Yeah. Senator Carrozza?
Know what we're looking at. So I thought when we went over the bill, Senate Bill 841, the first time that it had the nonprofit section in it, and now are
It did,
these?
but there wasn't a reporting requirement associated with it. This is adding a reporting requirement.
So this is, we're
yes.
still working off the base,
Yes.
and this is
This
in
is an
addition to the
it.
nonprofit
Correct.
language that's already in Senate Bill
Correct.
841.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Watson, this is your amendment. It's been broken into 4 separate topic areas, and so for efficiency purposes, can we just have maybe a discussion about the 4 distinct component parts and then take a vote on that front? Because now we have Senator Hester, kind of weighing on that supervisor officer issue, which is separate and distinct from the other 3 topics.
So can Devin just restate one by one and we go through?
Okay.
All right.
Sure. So
I think that's what we're.
the first amendment would add a reporting requirement to the green and renewable energy and energy efficiency for nonprofits loan program. The second,
Wait a minute.
nope.
So we're going to vote on that first.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to, that is, I think it's pages 1
It's
through.
through page 8 of 20 is the new language
Right.
added.
Yes.
So the chair could consider motions to separate out each of those to be created, and you could create them as separate motions, and then they could be treated as separate motions.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I know, I'm just saying procedurally, so
Okay,
that
here,
people are clear.
let's take a formal vote. All in favor of a motion to sever the discussion on 4 distinct component parts of the Watson bill. Okay, good? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Senator Washington's been appointed parliamentarian of the EEE Committee. Okay, with that, let's, back to you, Devin, on
So
1.
So now you are voting on whether or not to add on page 8, 10-869, which requires the Clean Energy Center to prepare an annual report on the total number of loans and funding amount provided under the program during the immediately preceding year, the greenhouse gas reductions expected, and then that report has to be sent to this committee and the House Environment and Transportation. Actually, it's just sent to this committee.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask the committee to resist this portion of the amendment. The body has passed this bill. I think we should be looking at least debating or considering the sponsor's amendment, which is in my hand and which can be distributed, and which I think is a little more prudently thought of. The Maryland Clean Energy Center gave us guidance because the plan was that we incorporate this report for green, for the nonprofit revolving loans, to help our nonprofit sector that can't get tax credits to participate in reducing their carbon footprint. So they already do an annual report to us. They would just add the data on green in the same format that they always do, at the same time that they always do. So I've got an
Okay,
amendment.
but why don't we do this process-wise? Let's go through this four-pronged Watson amendment, then we'll take your amendment up separately if the Watson amendment is rejected, okay? And you've asked to resist that amendment, because I think it's going to get very awkward for Devin and for committee council, having not seen your amendment, to, I think we're going to take it up, because here's, let me just, because I see the folks are here, just hear me out. We have delegates coming in here, starting to come in here. And so we're going to, I think, at one break, and then we're going to come back. I think we're going to have to come back because we've got Chair Corman, we've got people sitting in the audience. And so, but we're going to finish this amendment. It's got to go up or down, and you've indicated, I mean, we got to deal with this efficiently here, and we can't just wing it with your amendment, which is a separate amendment, which just showed up. Okay, did not just show up. We have a process issue here I'm trying to work through to make it all work. Okay, Sarah Watson, your light's on. We're going to work this through. We got 4 different bills in one little amendment, and so people like parts of the amendment and don't like others. That's the problem.
I got it. I'm sweet and salty, as Stacy calls me. Look, I just want to say that, I take issue with somebody saying my bill is more prudent. I think that's disrespectful, and I'm tired of the condescending tone when it comes to conversation among professionals here. So I just want to say that. I don't mind coming back and doing it at a later time, Mr. Chair. Have no problem at all. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? Because we're a little bit in stalemate on this particular amendment. We have Senator Kagan's amendment here. Okay, just for purposes of scheduling, we've got the Watson amendment we're in the middle of a discussion about. We've got the Harris amendment, and then we have Washington amendment, and we've got the Kagan amendment. We're going to take all those up immediately within 5-minute break when we're done with the House hearings, okay? These are, I think, relatively short-drift House hearings. Let's get through the House hearings. Let's not make our chairs of House committees, I see Chair Corman here, wait while we're debating all this, and then we will come back and we're going to finish this up. We are going to finish this up immediately after the bill hearings on the House are complete, okay?